And so now all of a sudden you are dropping down to your default. For a lot of people, that means that like you're falling back into habits that maybe aren't serving you. Welcome back to the Hale Fitness Podcast. I'm Coach Jay. I'm here with
Coach Katie
and
Coach Christina.
We're here to talk about what happens when work is kicking your ass and you're just not able to do whatever you need to do for your health and fitness, whether it's showing up at the gym or, eating enough protein or tracking your food or any of the number of things that it will require to get you where you need to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have a lot of clients that are dealing with this. We've dealt with this ourselves, and there's lots of people out there dealing with this stuff. And so I thought we would kind of talk through, without using any names, some like situations and talk about how we might break it down. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So when work is kicking your ass, right? So give me an example of, where you've seen this and some of the folks that you've worked with, or fictional examples.
Yeah, I would say I have a lot of compassion for this because I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I'll tend to just fill my day with work, you could call it.
Yeah.
And have definitely pained myself into a corner with it. Now I have such a small margin for error that I don't have time to do these other things that I kind of want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got a lot of sympathy for people who do this. I see it show up oftentimes for folks who are busy at work.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, meeting with enough people, you're like, is this just everybody? Everybody is so overworked, or has this perception that they're so overworked, and that there's not enough time, and there's never enough people, and there's always more that they should be doing. Yep. It really comes up, I would say, more often than not.
Yeah.
And so much so that sometimes when I go to meet with people, it feels like a confessional.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, let me apologize for all the things that I didn't do because 3 people at my job were laid off, and now I'm doing the work of 10 people. That's kind of how it appears in a lot of conversations.
So that's I want to dig into that. You work with lots of clients. Is this everybody?
Yes.
It's everybody. It's not everybody. Maybe it's 80% of the people.
I will say, I even have folks who are retired and are like, oh my gosh, I didn't have time this week to do the thing. And I'm like, huh? Tell me about that.
But what I think also with that is even if it's everyone or 80%, it normalizes it.
Totally.
It totally normalizes it and is well, everybody else is busy, I know. And then something else that I notice come up too is there's almost a sense of status that comes with I'm busy or I'm prioritizing work. They see everybody else do it. And so it's normalized. And then it gives them value to be well, I'm working, so that's why I'm not able to make time. And so they tie so much of their value and their status to their work and their product and how much they're doing, which then rationalizes it.
Yeah. I hear this with parents as well, where they are every weekend we got birthday parties and soccer tournaments and all these other things to do. Yeah. And it's I'm doing this for my kids. Mm-hmm. And so, they come first, so I don't have time to do the rest of this stuff.
That's right.
And I would say that there's sort of an epidemic of people being too busy, too busy to do X, Y, Z, A, B, and C. Yeah. And so how would you sort of break that down for people? What would you do? What would you tell them? You before we started recording, you kind of mentioned the idea of control and feeling and figuring out what you have control over.
Yeah. I think it starts with understanding, taking control of your circumstance instead of letting circumstance take control of your life.
Yeah.
And I think for some people that might be loaded in that if I say, you've got to take control of the situation. It's whoa. You're telling me that I'm not responsible. I'm not organized. I don't have ownership over my life.
Yeah.
And then a wall comes up.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, even as a coach, I'm okay, I know this is going to be a difficult conversation because those walls are going to come up. Mm-hmm. But it also tells me I'm okay, I'm getting somewhere because they are putting that wall up. Then I'm starting to get into somewhere that maybe they're not ready yet.
Yeah.
But in order to make that change, it's got to start happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So there has to be this underlying agreement with the client or in this case, I've had this conversation with you,
Yeah.
Katie. This underlying agreement that you are the one that has determined the situation that
That's
you're
right.
in.
Yeah.
Like all the choices you've made in life have led you here.
Yeah.
And that you own that you've made those choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
tough.
I
think
still struggle with it.
Yeah, it's tough. And like, I think that even before, like, recognizing that I have ownership is like, sometimes I find that like people have even lost a vision. If I ask someone to like think back on your life to a time when you had time to do these other things, people can't come up with one.
Yeah.
And so part of it is this challenge of like, I don't see other people around me doing this thing, which is creating space for themselves. And I don't remember a time when I did it. So I'm having to create out of nothing this vision that I think exists of like having time where I decide what I'm going to do with,
Yeah.
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 It's
So, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's uncomfortable
Super uncomfortable.
because you have to go against everything that you've been doing. And like sometimes I think about like, those like walking walkways at the airport.
Yeah.
It's like when you have to make a change, it feels like you're walking in the opposite direction and everyone is staring at you almost like, but that's the kind of discomfort that comes with making those changes.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So Katie, I kind of want to dig into this with you because it's a relevant example and you can speak to it.
Yeah.
So when you felt like things were just crazy at work, some of the, like, what were some of the things you were sacrificing in your sort of health and fitness?
It was really just having, I mean, like sleep comes to mind. I was just like pushing the margins so far that was like 7 hours of sleep was just the norm.
Yeah. You weren't getting enough
and
sleep.
it didn't feel like enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And weekend time. So wanting to do other things on the weekend, like spend time with my family or with friends
Yeah.
or whatnot, and feeling like I didn't have time to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about eating and workouts? Were
Yeah.
you skipping workouts? Were you skipping
yeah. So
meals?
workouts, I feel like were a little bit more scattered.
Yeah.
And I would say it was less that I wasn't working out and more that I felt unfocused when I was doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel fully present because my mind was on the things that I had to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Food wise, I was just defaulting to my defaults, which, aren't terrible, but they certainly weren't helping me get to the goals that I have for myself around strength.
Yeah, so you were under eating. Yeah. Use a lot of words. You weren't eating enough. Your default is you don't.
That's right.
You generally undereat.
Right.
Right. And so when things kind of went, where everything was busy, you were like, hey, I'm not making any additional changes.
Yeah. I mean, it manifested for me in physically, it was messing with my stomach and messing with my digestion. So it just made those things even harder. Harder to get back on top or feeling like you're doing anything other than just treading water.
Yeah. So you just drop down to the baseline of the minimum acceptable.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is going to be different for you than it is for someone else.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, my baseline is overeating.
Yeah.
Right. I will eat more. Right. And the workout part, it's like, I'm at the point now where I pretty much will work out, but like I won't, like you said, it will be unfocused. I maybe won't try as hard. Maybe I'll do more just like general movement. But to me, when I feel like this sense of just like everything is putting all this pressure on me, I just default to those things. Yeah. Do you have a default, Christina?
Yeah. I think about back before I became a full-time coach and I was teaching and the level of stress I was experiencing then. And similarly, like I couldn't imagine taking on any more.
Yeah.
I coming in and just showing up. That was my baseline. It's like I'm going to show up. It was 3 to 4 times a week. 4 times was good.
Yeah.
And my eating was under eating similarly. And I was just in a constant state of stress. So similarly, my I had regular acid reflux.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
Like no amount of sleep could make me feel better. It didn't matter what I ate. I just felt exhausted. And so like the smallest tasks always felt overwhelming.
Yeah. So we've all kind of been through some version of this.
Have you?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your default?
Well, that's what I said. It's my default is overeating and kind of like undermoving, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it is one of those things where, I mean, I'm constantly pushing myself to the point of having too many things on my plate.
Yeah.
Like it's part of what I do. I want to see what's possible, so I'll push to get to that point. And then I'll be like, okay, well, what shakes out? What ends up being the most important thing? What are the things I default to? And then I'll go back and sort of change what those defaults are if I can.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a couple of things here. I wanted you to share this stuff because, I mean, we see this with our clients. It's like, we're recording this in September and it's a busy time for people. I hate using that word busy, but it's like a time where a lot of things happen, right? Kids go back to school. And so people start focusing on theirselves. And if you are, in a like a service where you're helping people, then you will all of a sudden have more people asking things and more people coming and more people going. Like we see this at the gym. So there's just like all this activity, right? And it happens, I think there's like 2 or 3 times a year this happens, but September and January are like really big ones if you're kind of in that service industry. And so now all of a sudden you are dropping down to your defaults, your sort of baseline. And for a lot of people, that means that like you're falling back into habits that maybe aren't serving you, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what I thought we would talk about is just like some strategies for kind of getting through that. And then maybe, how do we handle it when we're in it? And then how do we kind of make it better for the next time? Does that make sense? Yeah. I think it is normal to default to what you're used to.
Yeah.
When you feel like things are kind of crushing you. Right. And the first thing that I would say is like, there's gotta be sort of this baseline of like, you still want the goal, right? So we're talking about health and fitness, work is kicking your butt. You still want to get in shape, right? And, so you have to have that as a default, but also you have to have a default of like, you have control over the situation. And I think those are the first 2 things. So our job as coaches is to help you realize that you actually do have control over the situation. How do we do that?
Well, I mean, I can tell you how it usually plays out.
Yeah.
And it's true that like the people who are ambitious in their work life are also ambitious in their like fitness and health life. So I don't think it's surprising that we get a lot of people who like want to improve aspects of their health, and they can also be really hard to work with for that reason. And so typically they come in with ambition to do a lot of things. And we, have kind of a routine in how we assess people and see where they're at. And then that helps us kind of form a plan for them around nutrition and fitness. So usually what happens is we give them a plan and they agree to it. They're 10 out of 10 ready to do it. And then we come back to check in week 2 and it's like, oh, I didn't do any of that. Sorry, coach. That didn't work out. And so like then typically what we'll do is like, let's troubleshoot. Was it that we were missing a skill, or was that we were missing a piece of information? Were we missing a reminder? Or was it that this was too much to bite off? And do we need to make the task easier? So I guess your question of like, how do you approach it is like, how do you get that like threshold to start a little bit lower?
Yeah. And I think it's something you said earlier. I think it comes back to like, when we give you the plan, like, yes, the ideal is that you execute everything on the plan. But as coaches, we do not expect you to do that. Like, it's actually fairly rare that we say, here's your plan. And then for the first 2 weeks or whatever, everyone does everything perfectly. But when I give you the plan, if I say, Christina, here's your plan, you're going to walk away with this plan and go, great, I'm going to do this perfectly. Like, that's what you think, right? I'm going to be perfect in this, just like I am perfect in everything else. And that's how it's going to go, right? And then you come back to your coach and now you feel shame because you're looking at it going, wow, I was not perfect.
Yeah. And I think that shame hits some people harder than others in that they come in and they see that they failed. And it's a personal reflection of them. And they want to give up. And I think what a greater takeaway could be is understanding this, not just in the aspect of fitness. But if you could apply it to other parts of your life of like, I'm going to try again, and that these failures really are getting me closer to my goal.
Yes.
And I feel like if you can accomplish that in 8 weeks, that's beautiful. That like, wow, even though I failed all these other times, I was still able to accomplish this goal.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What we have found is as long as you still want the goal, right?
Right.
Now it could be like your goal is to lose 15 pounds is always the one I pick for these examples, but your goal is to lose 15 pounds. But if you let go of the timeline of that goal and you just accept that maybe it will be 8 weeks, maybe it's going to be 8 months.
Yeah.
Right? If you let go of the timeline, then you never fail, right? You just do the thing. So you have this goal, you still want the goal, and then understanding that you have control means that if you're not perfect, then it's just data.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, here are the facts. The facts are I had this idea that I was going to do this, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what's the plan for this week to get closer to this?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I did great. Hey, I gave you 100 things to do and you did 70 of them. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? That's actually really good.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do 71 this next week and 72 the following week? Yeah.
I love this, like what you both are putting out, which is like this little mindset shift around like, do I take what happened last week, this behavior, this maybe this thing that I didn't follow through on, and do I let it reflect something about me? Or can I step back and view it from this like curious detective lens of like, oh, that's interesting information. What does that mean? And what I definitely see is like the folks who take that on so personally have typically a harder time making adjustments.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and sometimes they just will not even show up. And it's this like, when you add that layer of shame, now you add this like really challenging emotion. And then we will go to great lengths to escape emotions that are uncomfortable for us. And that might be shutting down, that might be like escaping. And so now here's more time that I'm not doing the thing because I'm dealing with the consequences of this feeling I have about a judgment.
Yeah. And that's right. And this is actually most challenging with people who are like straight A students.
Totally.
Yeah. It's
Count
like,
myself included. I've been there.
yeah.
Oh, shame.
I used to
Catholic
do
school.
Yeah. I used for me it would be like one semester I'd get straight A's and one semester I'd like be on academic probation. I mean, it's like
All or
this
nothing.
perfection thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what I actually found is like it's better to just get B's and C's. Like C's get degrees. You know what I mean? Like it's
B plus ever can change the world.
exactly because life is not like school. Like being perfect, there's no reward for being perfect. There's a reward for taking action.
Yeah.
And the more you can take action, the more rewarded you are. So it's like get rid of being perfect in the short term and focus on taking action in the long term. It will pay off.
Yeah.
Because like if you go straight A's one semester and then like D's the next semester, on average you're like C plus versus like just getting B's. Right. And that's like, I think that's how a lot of people kind of live their life is like, if it's not perfect, I am not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's where the overwhelm kind of comes from.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I think you mentioned this earlier, one of the ways that we recommend people kind of approach this is, okay, great. We have this ideal plan.
Yeah.
You've done this.
Yeah.
Great. So, we're here, you are here.
Yeah.
Great. So this next week, we're going to start here. We're going to start at the sort of 70% level and we're going to go to 71%.
Yeah.
So we're essentially going to make it easier.
Yeah.
How do we make this easier? If I say you have to walk 8,000 steps a day, right? And last week you walked 1,000 steps a day.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Like what are some of the strategies that we can use to get you to 2,000 steps?
Yeah.
Right? Well, I could take a walk out after dinner. Fantastic. So as soon as you finish dinner, you will put your fork down and just walk outside, right? You can walk in your pajamas. And if you do that, then you're winning.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden now what became this perfect, like 8,000 or nothing just becomes a 5-minute walk after dinner.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're able to get 2,000.
Totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what you ended up doing and what I've done is like, when you get overwhelmed, you just make things as easy as possible.
Yeah.
You go back to your defaults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this notion of like making things easier. And like sometimes even too, I'll use just do the thing once. We're not even going for like do it 5 days, like because that first time is really what it's all about. It's like once you prove to yourself that you can do a thing once, now like I almost don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
Now you will continue to just, do the thing. And in fact, like I feel like this may have even been like advice that you gave me or something that I took was like when I was feeling overwhelmed with my schedule, it was like I shifted one thing on it. I had one hard conversation with somebody and I moved somebody off of this, like, because before I would just schedule out my day 5:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. just like willy-nilly, whenever anyone was available. And it was like, okay, I'm going to start chipping away at all the people who I have from 3 o'clock to 5:30 and let me move them.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, I moved one person and I was like, and then that day got better. I went home at 3:30 and I was like, what is this? I went to the beach. It was great. But it was like all I had to do. And it was one person that I moved. That was it. And then it was like, oh my gosh. Oh, if I can do it with them, like maybe I can do it with this person. Let me have a second conversation. And before you know it, great. I've built a schedule that works really well.
Yeah. You found a way to win.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't the full solution.
Yeah.
You did just one little small
piece
thing
of it.
and you found a way to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I also like that you said is like adding it after something you're doing daily, something like dinner. If you have dinner daily and then adding your task to something that you are already doing, it's going to be that much easier than trying to create this brand new routine that isn't tied to anything. So I always think about that too. And so like, when you helped me, Jay, as far as like my dog training and that I was like, okay, I walk my dogs and then you were like, play with them. Just set a timer for 5 minutes and play with them. And so to this day, since we've had that conversation, I walk them for 20 to 30 minutes. I set a timer and I play with them for at least 5 minutes. And there have been less holes in the wall.
Oh my God.
That's awesome.
That's
And you probably were thinking like, oh, I need to like be this perfect trainer.
Absolutely.
That like I have to do all of the stuff. I have to
read all these different like training manuals. I have to watch all these YouTube videos.
Totally.
Like I felt like I had to do all this research before I could execute something. And instead you're like, just do a 5-minute timer and just play with them.
Yeah.
And it made a huge difference.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. And that's really it. When we kind of go back to this, like when you feel overwhelmed, you fall back to your baseline. Mm-hmm. And one of the keys, I think, to building a long-term, like healthy body is to change what your baseline is, right? So like before I started doing all of this, my baseline wasn't to go to the gym 3 times a week, right? Yeah. My baseline wasn't to eat, how much protein I eat. Neither were yours, I would guess.
Yeah. Right.
Right? It might be your baseline was to have, a glass of wine at night instead.
Oh yeah, I used to eat rice, frozen veggies, and a Coors Light. That was my dinner.
Right. So that was your baseline.
Yeah.
And so I think if you understand that, like for somebody that's
That's so gross.
Coors Light though.
Yeah. Like my
Keeping
like
those calories
one of
low.
them.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing drinking one of them?
What's the point?
What's the point? Like,
that was your practice of moderation.
that's right.
Some discipline. But it's so funny because like my baseline is often like what I see in a lot of my clients is like under eating. I would have like, okay, I'm going to have a salad and then like that was at lunch and then didn't eat anything and then come around like 7 o'clock, I'm starving. And so then I just binge on whatever is around me. And what my baseline was not having Whole Foods around, it was having chips around, it was having processed like food. And so that was my baseline.
Yeah. This is it. The first thing we try to establish for all of you who are kind of listening to this is a baseline of going to the gym 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. It's like when I talked to you on the original console call, I asked you, can you commit to showing up 3 times a week? Mm-hmm. Because if I can start with that, if you can do 3 times a week for like a year, Now all of a sudden you've got 152 votes for you being somebody, 156 votes for you being somebody who shows up at the gym, right? That's a lot of votes. And so then it's just like, okay, great. You can do that 3 times a week. Maybe let's add in some general movement. So you're going to walk 8,000 steps a day. If you do that for a year, now you have an additional 350, I forget all the things, 356
65.
votes. Yeah.
65.
365. 365 days of voting like you are that type of person. And then it can be like, okay, you are eating protein for breakfast. So now let's say we've established all these habits. You walk every day, you show up at the gym 3 times a week, and you eat protein for breakfast. And you do all of that stuff for a year. And your work just goes absolutely nuts, right? For like 2 months. But you're still doing those things. At the end of those 2 crazy months, your baseline is still there, right? And now when things are starting to relax, we can say, okay, great, let's start getting more protein at lunchtime, right? And then it becomes, all of a sudden, you're like one of those people that like eats, fruits and vegetables because you enjoy them, and like, eats a bunch of protein and like lifts weights because you actually love it, because you've just reestablished what that baseline is. And I think what people try to do is they try to make perfect their new baseline. And it's just too much space. Right. It's just like you eating a perfect, like, fruits and vegetables and all that other stuff, and working out every day and doing 8,000. Like if you've never done anything before, that's just a big leap. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's a big leap. Yeah. And so I think when you're feeling that overwhelm, just figure out what your baseline is, right? Yeah. And when you are feeling like you have some capacity, just slowly inch up what that is, over time, until eventually it just becomes what you do. That's our like secret plan for all of you guys.
That's right.
And if you don't know what your baseline is, then reach out to your coach and start figuring that out.
Yeah. And that's just it. So one of the things you'll tell people when they're super busy is just get to the gym. I don't care what you eat. Just get to the gym. Let's just establish that. And then one of the things that I think is really important is, once people do that, to celebrate it. Yeah. Just like, you came to the gym 3 days a week for 10 weeks. Yeah. That's 30 times. Yeah. How many times did you do it before? Right?
Yeah, I definitely see that. Like with the folks, sometimes it's with the folks who are most overwhelmed, or also the folks who are most self-critical. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm doing all these things, but I'm still not doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, sometimes it's just helpful to be like, have you ever considered like giving yourself credit for everything that you're already doing? Yeah. Like, you're doing so much. Yeah. Like, do you ever stop and like reflect and give yourself a little pat on the back for that? Like, nobody does that.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah. And you're a freak.
and I think the perfectionism also sets in with like, well, if I go to the gym, I'm not going to be able to lift my max, or I'm not going to be able to do as well as I'd like. And the reality is that happens all the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but it happens. And it's part of the process is to learn how to show up when you're not feeling 100%, knowing that you're not going to be able to hit your expectation or your coach's expectation, and then managing. If it's disappointment, then it's disappointment, or, what that feeling is like.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to give a couple of like just crunchy, actionable things that people can do if they're feeling like their work is kicking their ass or they're just overwhelmed. So the first one is this: establish what your baseline is. What is the minimum that you will be willing to accept?
Bare ass minimums. Yeah. BAMs. There's a name for that.
Okay. Never heard that one before. Yeah. Yeah. Try to wear clothes when you come in. So establish what your minimums are and make that the minimum that you're willing to accept. Like if it's showing up 3 times a week, great. If it's showing up once a week and then walking 5,000 steps, 8,000 steps, great. That's the minimum. If everything goes crazy, you will still do that, right? That's number 1. Number 2, it's actually number 2, 3 or whatever. I'll just make number 2. Yeah. You have 2 options. We would need to find a way for you to celebrate progress. So I'm going to give you 2 options. One is you track everything, right? So track all the food that you're eating, track the workouts you're doing, track the weights that you're doing. Everything that you track gives you another chance to celebrate, So that's one way to do it. And if you're a little more of a data-driven person, then that's really helpful. Like I have a whole spreadsheet of like all the stuff for me. And I was showing it to you earlier. I look at it and I'm like, ooh, look, I did this.
Totally. Oh my gosh, look at my average, Rick. I see. I'm like, whoa, right.
Yeah. And it calculates out for like how I'm going to do 6 months from now. It's like,
and if you were a video game, like happiness level would be like,
yeah, exactly. So that's one. But then the other one, if you're more of an intuitive kind of feeling person, journal every day. And just write down your thoughts. And you can journal specifically around your health and fitness or just everything. Like, one of the suggestions that works really well is daily pages. Have you guys ever tried that? Yeah, you've tried that?
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah, just write 3 pages every single day for like 12 weeks of just what is on your mind. And if you're more intuitive, what happens is you start writing down some of those like wins that you have, and you get all this like gunk out of your head, and you start looking back and you're like, wow, I was like a total train wreck 12 weeks ago, but now I've been doing this, like I actually feel better.
Yeah. And it won't keep you up at night where you're going through everything that you haven't done during the day. Like,
right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And can it help you put words? Because sometimes like the feeling of like overwhelm or like I'm doing all these things actually is just a fact that like there's a lot of things in your head you haven't really been able to like wrap your mind around or like kind of wrap yourself around. And once you start to do that, you realize that like, oh, actually, there are things I can do. And then I would add to like with the journaling, I think something that is true is that like, if you find that you're chronically stressed and like you're chronically doing bare ass minimums when you maybe want to be doing more, there is like a level of self-examination I think that's worthwhile. And some of this, like I'll work with clients to like visualize. Can you visualize what it is that you actually want? And you can close your eyes and do it, or you can write it down. Yeah. But it's this way of like speaking to that like, if you don't already have an idea of what you want that to be and you don't see it happening around you, like you have to kind of create that vision. And sometimes it's even trying on an identity that you're uncomfortable with and just using it as an experiment. I'm going to try on the identity of like being the person who makes eggs for breakfast. And I'm going to do it like tongue in cheek, not like I have any stake in this or whatnot, and not expecting anything from it. And then just see what happens. Yeah. And that's where when you have the support of a coach, it just makes it a lot easier because you can do these little experiments and then get some support around it and then sort of celebrate it and stuff. So yeah, that's great. Awesome. I think we're gonna end it there. If you found this useful, do us a favor, leave us a comment or send us a note, info@halefitness.com, and let us know what was the most useful thing that you heard today. Appreciate you all. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we've got plenty of others. Go check out this one over here.